Okay, so coming down onto your belly. We want to be comfortable here. So if you've got quite sharp hips or even quite a curved lower back, it might actually serve you to place a blanket or a sort of quite small, thin cushion underneath your pelvis, or even underneath your forehead, or even both. So coming down onto your belly, let's get a bit more light in here. There we go, that's warmer. And as you come down, take your time to get comfortable. Bend your elbows, either resting your forehead on your hands, or like me, just keeping your hands spread out. I'm not going to have my head down, otherwise you just won't be able to hear me. So you can have your head on the floor or on your hands. I'm going to keep my head up. And as you rest here, let everything settle, let everything sink into the floor. And start to press downwards with your elbows, your forearms. So you generate some effort around your armpits, around the sides of your rib cage. And here we just want to notice whether we've got access to the back of our ribs. As you breathe in, can you feel the back of your ribs? As you breathe out, again, can you feel the back of your ribs? And just starting to be slightly more active with our breathing. So as you breathe in, deliberately expanding to the sides of your waist, into your kidney region, so slightly below your ribs. And as you breathe out, a slightly more vigorous, active exhale. You can breathe out through your mouth or through your nose if that's more comfortable. Using your exhale to create more of a hugging sensation around your ribs. Using a full exhale as well to help you breathe in better. So it's more of a contrast when you breathe in. A couple more rounds of this style of breathing, continuing to press your elbows down into the floor. And then return to more of a subtle rhythm of breath. And gradually bring yourself up onto your forearms for Sphinx. So there is a much more uncomfortable way of doing Sphinx. So if you're uncomfortable, make sure that your elbows aren't too far back. They're not too wide. Roughly, you want them underneath your shoulders. So elbows sort of in a straight line underneath your shoulders. So you can start to bring more lift into your chest. Now here, we want to make sure that our pelvis is supported. So this is where we start to create some effort through our legs and our pelvis. So the tops of your thighs are heavy, your pubic bone is heavy, and your breastbone pulls forwards. As you pause here, pay attention to your breath. And then beginning to move just your neck. Try drawing your chin back slightly, so a bit of a double chin, and then rounding chin to chest. And then lift up. Try this a couple of times. Notice if you can isolate your neck, chin to chest. Chin lifts. Really pushing downwards with your elbows. The next time your chin pulls to your chest, we start to send this articulation down the length of our spine. So allow or actively round the space between your shoulder blades towards the ceiling. Round your lower ribs towards the ceiling. Round your lower back towards the ceiling, hollowing your belly away from the floor. Then undulate back down. Belly and pelvis land. Breastbone pulls forwards. We'll try this again, chin to chest. Rounding your upper back towards the ceiling. So you're pulling your breastbone away from the floor. You're then pulling your lower ribs away from the floor. Pulling your belly button away from the floor. Maybe lifting your pelvis straight up. Undulating back down, breastbone forwards. One more time, chin to chest. Rounding towards the ceiling. Undulate back down. Slide your hands back. Make your way up to all fours. And then from all fours, make your way down onto your back, semi-supine. And as you arrive here, just noticing that your feet are hip width apart. Observe the weight of your pelvis. Notice how your ribs make contact with the mat, your shoulders and the back of your head. Observing your breath once more. It's like being, again, slightly more active with our breathing, using our breath to create more shape change, more sensation in our torso. As you breathe in, allow your breath to move down into the space between your two frontal hip points. Then expanding out into your waist and expanding out into your ribs. So the back of your ribs gets heavier. And as you breathe out, let everything draw back inwards. So your two frontal hip points draw together. Your waist narrows. Your ribs narrow. Keep going. So breathing in, expanding from the bottom up. So a bit like you're a jug of water and you're filling yourself up. And then breathing out, you empty out from the bottom up again. Maintain the effort between your two frontal hip points. Keep your breath now moving mostly into the sides, the front, the back of your ribs. You bring your hands to rest on your two frontal hip points and begin to roll your pelvis. So your waistband will get heavy first and then roll along towards your tailbone. Waistband to tailbone. As you're moving, try and keep your rib cage and your head still. So you're not letting this movement make its way up. It stays isolated at your pelvis. The next time your waistband rounds into the mat, pause there for a moment. Feel the sort of vertebra of your lower back pressing into your mat, rounding down into the mat. And then bring your arms down either side of you as you gradually, slowly begin to lift away from the floor. So you're peeling your spine up, coming up to about shoulder blade heights. And then rolling back down. So start from the top. Make your way down. Pelvis lands last. Try this action twice more, really carefully healing yourself up. And by carefully, I mean not practicing caution, I mean working with care. So really observing, does your spine articulate, or are there areas that move as one big chunk? Can you use the feedback from the floor to let you know how your spine moves? Can you spend maybe a little bit more time on any sticky areas, any areas that don't like to articulate? Slowly making your way back down. As your pelvis lands, notice its weight. Bring your hands to your pelvis once more. Find a couple of rounds of the breathing that we did when we were filling up from the bottom up. So you fill up the space between your two frontal hip points, the sides of your waist, the sides of your ribs. You're sort of pressurizing your torso. As you breathe out, the opposite action happens, zipping up pubic bone to breastbone. Looking to now maintain the stability of your pelvis. It stays glued to the floor. Lower back is light. It might be off the floor, but it's definitely not pressing down into the floor. The back of your ribs should feel heavy. The back of your head stays in contact with the floor. Those 3 contact points stay the same as you begin to march your legs up and down, lifting one leg at a time. The work here is in keeping your pelvis still as you move your legs. Sometimes it's very useful, if you have access to this position, to bring your fingertips to your pelvis and your thumbs to your lower ribs. So you're just noticing whether this space gets bigger or smaller as you move your legs. The intention is to keep the distance the same, so you don't get bigger as your feet come down. The space doesn't get smaller as your feet lift up. Now lift your left leg. Keep your left leg lifted and bring your right leg up. Again, making sure that you're not rounding your lower back into the floor, making sure pelvis is stable and you can feel the back of your ribs is heavy. Keep your hands where they are initially, again, so you can observe any change in this position as you extend your right leg forwards. Draw your right knee back in, and then extend left leg forwards. As you move here, just notice any changes in your contact points with the floor. Try and keep them stable. If you're finding this challenging, my advice is to keep your hands on your torso. If you can keep still as you move your legs, reach both arms up to the ceiling. The next time your right leg reaches forwards, reach your left arm back. Other 2 limbs stay completely still. Bring those limbs back in. Left leg forwards, right arm back. Other 2 limbs stay still. So you're alternating here. One arm reaches back, one leg reaches forwards. It's the opposite side. As you move, stabilizing against this disturbance. The pelvis stays in contact with the floor. That contact doesn't change. Rib cage stays in contact with the floor. Back through the center. Give your knees a circle. Let your breath move into soft, open space. As your knees return together, roll yourself up and round to all fours, hands and knees. As you arrive here, actively push the floor away with your hands and make sure that you're not rounding your upper back towards the ceiling. So your gaze, this is a quite useful tool here. Make sure you're looking down slightly ahead of your fingers rather than back at your knees, and that will guide what your upper back does. As you pause here, notice your breath. Notice, can you keep your upper back still as you begin to roll your pelvis, just like you were doing when you were on your back? Tailbone pulls down, tailbone lifts up. This movement might be smaller than you expect, especially because you're not allowing it to extend up into your upper back. So shoulders stay broad, hands stay heavy. The next time your tailbone begins to tip down, your waistband lifts up towards the ceiling. Slowly let this shape articulate its way up the length of your spine, pushing the floor away, flexing fully. Really think here, pulling your tailbone towards the floor, pulling your belly away from your mats, pressing down into your hands. Keep your upper back as it is initially, as you initiate extension from your pelvis. So what I mean by that, your tailbone will point up, your belly button points or pulls down towards the floor, your lower ribs pull down towards the floor. Your breastbone gradually begins to pull forwards, but your shoulder blades stay apart. So you're not letting your shoulder blades come together. Your hands stay heavy. This effort is making its way evenly through your spine, so it's not all in your neck. Keep pushing with those hands as once more you articulate into spinal flexion from your pelvis. So rounding towards the ceiling. Can you use the muscles of your bottom and your hamstrings to create this sense of pull? As you round up towards the ceiling. One more time into extension, begin from your pelvis. Keep your shoulder blades broad. Keep your hands heavy. Coming back to the middle ground between those two shapes as you come down onto your elbows. You can either have your fingertips pointing forwards or interlace your fingers here. Keep both elbows heavy and aim to keep your pelvis and your spine still. So the movement here is coming only from your hip. We're going to lift our right foot off the floor. Right knee stays down. So keep that right knee on the floor as you bend your right knee heel to bottom. Make sure that elbows and left knee stay solid as you pull your right knee towards your chest. It might not be a very big movement, that's okay. Open your right leg out to the right. Circle your right leg round behind you. Lift your foot towards the ceiling without this movement going into your spine. Pull your knee to your chest. Reverse this action, so right foot lifts up. Right kneecap rotates out to the right. Right knee towards your armpit. Right leg underneath you. Press your right leg back. Pull right knee to chest. Open your leg out to the right. Circle your leg round behind you. Keep pressing down with those elbows as you bring knee to chest. Once more reversing, leg comes up and back. Kneecap out to the right. Pull your knee towards your armpit. Bring your leg underneath you. Press your leg back. Then lower your knee down. Lift up onto your hands. Push the floor away with your hands. Once more, make sure that you're not rounding your upper back. So you're looking slightly ahead of your fingers. Curl your toes under. Hover your knees only about 1 inch off the floor. See if you can keep your pelvis in line with your rib cage so it doesn't lift up. Create the action of pulling hands to feet, feet to hands. And then release that sense of pull as you lift your knees and press up and back to downwards facing dog. So you're actively pressing the floor away. Notice the line of your breath here. Notice the curves of your spine. Walk both hands back towards your feet, grounding your heels. As you come back, begin to push down with your feet. Really sense that those heels can be very heavy. As you keep pushing down, slowly roll up to standing. So you're curling upwards. Chest, rib cage stacks over your pelvis. Sweep your arms out and up. Reach your left arm down your left leg. Right arm comes up and over. Bend your knees so they pull forwards over your toes. Press down into the floor. Come all the way back up. Switch sides. So your right arm reaches down the length of your right leg. Both knees come forwards over your toes. Press the floor away, reach all the way back up. Connect your palms, lower your thumbs to your heart space. As you release your hands, tuck your chin to your chest and roll forwards. Upper back rounds, middle back, lower back, pelvis tips. Hands come down. Walk your hands forwards away from your feet. Lower your knees to the floor and then lower your forearms down, either interlacing fingers or fingertips pointing forwards. This time left leg. So everything else stays still. This is just happening at your hip joint. If your hip is really stiff, the movement has to be small. So don't try and make it a big movement and sacrifice stability in your torso. It's better to be stable and just do a really small movement of your hip. That will have much more effect on your body. So as you push into both forearms, as you push down into your right leg, pull your left heel towards your bottom, and then pull your left knee towards your chest. So if you look at your screen, you can hardly see me flexing my hip. That's because it's difficult. So I'm not bringing it all the way in and rounding my spine. My spine stays neutral. As my left leg opens out to the left, again, it's quite a small lift. Circle your left leg round behind you. Make sure that you're not extending your spine. So you shouldn't feel any different in the middle of your back. Pull your left knee back in towards your chest and reverse the movement. Left leg presses back. Left kneecap out to the left. Pull your knee towards your armpit. Bring your leg underneath you and press your leg back. Let's go one more in each direction. So knee to chest. Knee out to the left. Circle your leg round. Pull your knee in. Once more reversing. So knee comes back. Kneecap out to the left. Knee towards your armpit. Leg underneath you. Knee presses back. Lower your left knee down. Come up onto your hands. Organize your spine. So imagine here that you've got a broomstick on the back of your body and it's resting on the back of your head, the top of your upper back, and the back of your pelvis. So those points stay in contact. As you tuck your toes under, hover your knees only about 1 inch off the floor. The higher you go, actually the easier it is. So don't lift your knees too high, keep it a challenge. Pull hands to feet, pull feet to hands. Notice, can you stabilize those spinal curves? Can you stabilize through your center? Release this sense of pull as you straighten your legs, make your way back to downwards facing dog. From your downwards facing dog, slowly walk hands to feet, ground your heels. Actively push the floor away and roll up to standing. You're stacking your spine here, articulating. Reach your arms out and up. Can you keep your pelvis really stable here. So your bottom is switched on and your legs, it's almost like you're trying to corkscrew your feet out. And this action winds up into your hip joints. That as we reach to the left, we're laterally flexing our spine. We're not shifting our pelvis out to the right. Reach back up through the center and move over to the right. Pelvis stays stable. Reach all the way back up. Connect your palms. Lower your thumbs to your heart space. Tuck your chin to your chest and round forwards. As you come forwards, walk your hands away from your feet. Bring both knees down to the floor. As your knees come down, start to walk your hands. So fingers turn out, then fingers will turn back. And reverse, go back the opposite way. Fingers turn out away from each other. Fingers turn forwards. Fingers turn in towards each other and as far back as possible in this version of the rotation. So as those fingers start to turn out away from each other, notice how far back you can turn them. So they'll either be pointing at your knees or they might be slightly diagonally out away from each other. Pause here. So very deep wrist extension. If this feels unmanageable, try shifting a bit of your weight forwards. So the angle of your wrist joints is slightly bigger. What we want to do here, what we want to feel is a stretch down the back edge of our forearm. So the one that's got all the veins, the bit where you have your injections, the bit where your watch buckle tends to sit rather than your watch face. And as you pause here, start to press down with your fingers. So your fingers are trying to push through the mats. It's like you're trying to make your fingerprints bigger, deeper. Release the downwards pressure through your fingers and create the action as though you're trying to lift your fingers up. So you'll feel the heels of your hands get heavier. So you release this effort from your hands. Walk your fingers round. Bring yourself up off your hands and give your fingers a flick. From your high kneeling shape, step your right foot forwards. So as your right foot comes forwards, make sure your left knee stays directly underneath your hip. And you've got more of a right angle here. So it's 90 degrees, 90 degrees. Bring your hands to your hips, your pelvis, and create this action of trying to roll your pelvis forwards and backwards. So just like you were doing when you were on your back. The next time your tailbone pulls down. Pause there and also try and pull your right hip down slightly so your pelvis levels out from left to right. And ideally here, we want to feel a sense of stretch running through the front of our left hip and perhaps even down the thigh, your left thigh. Maintain this effort in your pelvis. Reach your arms out and up. Interlace your fingers, bring your palms to the base of your skull. Pull your elbows towards each other. As your elbows pull close, also try lifting them up slightly towards the ceiling. As you maintain this effort of your pelvis, start to lift your breastbone. So this action now, it's cats and cows, just for our upper back. Pelvis stays still. As you now round your upper back, so you're looking down at your right leg. Breastbone lifts, and then upper back rounds. One more time. Lift your chest. And as you round forwards, pause here. Press your elbows out in front of you, so you're stretching your shoulder blades apart. Try and push your ribs back. So it's the same kind of hollowing shape that we were doing right at the start on our bellies. As you come out of this position, reach your left arm forwards, sweep your right arm back. So your chest spins open to the right. And just pause here, notice your breath. Tip forwards, bring your left hand down to the floor, right arm reaches up to the ceiling. You have the option to keep your left knee, down, or to lift your left knee up, back knee. From where you are, sweep your right arm forwards, step your right leg back, and then lower both knees down to the floor. Create the effort of pushing into your hands. Make sure that you're not rounding towards the ceiling. Curl your toes under. Hover your knees an inch off the floor. Try pulling hands to feet, feet to hands. So you create intentional tension in your body. Release this sense of pull as you make your way up and back to downwards facing dog. Slowly walk hands back to feet. Round your heels. And make your way up to standing. Sweep your arms out and up. Keep your pelvis stable, just like when you were in your lunge. As you reach your left arm down your left leg, right arm goes up and over. Back up through the center. Right arm down your right leg, left arm reaches up and over. Reach both arms high. Connect your palms, lower your thumbs to your heart space. As you release your hands, tuck chin to chest, round forwards. Walk your hands forwards away from your feet. Lower both knees down to the floor. And we'll return to our wrists. So again, walking your hands, so fingers point out away from each other, fingers point back. And then reversing, other way. So hands go all the way round, fingers towards each other. As your fingers start to point out away from each other, those fingers to point as far back as possible and revisit this wrist extension stretch. So you're pushing down with your fingers. Can you create any more effort there from little finger to thumb? Then create the effort of trying to lift your fingers up so the heels of your hands get heavier. Slowly ease out of this stretch. Bring the weight out of your hands. Give your fingers a flick. From your high kneeling shape, step your left foot forwards. Again, make sure that you're stacked. You're not in a big long lunge, just for more support really from your pelvis. Bring your hands to your hips and give your pelvis a tilt forwards and backwards. The next time your pelvis, your waistband starts to tip back, pause there. So create some stretch and effort around your right buttock. Allow the left side of your pelvis to draw down towards the floor. Reach your arms out and up. Interlace your fingers, bring your palms to the base of your skull. Pull your elbows towards each other. Keeping your pelvis still. Again, this is just your upper back moving here as you pull your chest towards the ceiling. Make sure that you're not throwing your pelvis forwards. And then rounding your upper back. Again, make sure your pelvis isn't changing position. It stays stable. Breastbone lifts up. Breastbone rounds forwards. Again, pausing in this flexed position. So it will look, if you actually look at it, it looks really small, but it hopefully will feel like quite a lot of effort. Quite a lot of effort in your right hip, down your right thigh, in your right buttock to keep this lower back completely still. And then you're trying to push your rib cage backwards. Pull your elbows forwards. Notice, can you breathe into the back of your ribs? Gradually come up out of this shape. Maintain some support through your pelvis. Sweep your right arm forward to reach your left arm back. So chest spins open to the left. Maintain this rotation, tip forwards, lower your right hand down, lift your left arm up. You might stay with your right knee on the floor. You might lift your right knee, your choice. Sweep your left arm down. Step your left leg back. Bring both knees to the floor. Push into your hands. And again, check your upper back isn't rounding. Shoulder blades are wide. Curl all 10 toes under. Hover your knees just off the floor. Pull hands to feet. Pull feet to hands. Maintain this sense of pull. Release the pull as you lift up and back to downwards facing dog. Walk your hands back towards your feet, grounding your heels. As you push the floor away with your feet, roll up to standing. Sweep your arms out and up. Connect your palms, lower your thumbs to your heart space. As you release your hands, working now with some hip capsule rotation. So we're going to keep one leg still and look to rotate our body over that leg, trying to work and really activate all of the musculature that supports and stabilizes our hip joint. So it might be that you lean against a wall. If your balance is not there today, that's okay. This is more about hip stability than it is about balancing on one leg. So if you need to take out one option, the balance option is the best thing to take out. So I'm going to mirror you now. I haven't been for the class just to confuse you. So coming into your right leg, right toes are relaxed, but you want the ball of your foot from the big toe base to the little toe base to be really firmly planted, heel grounded. And your left leg is just going to come out of the way. So you might bend your left knee or you might just sort of hover it. She says as she can't balance. Create the effort of trying to wind your right thigh up into your hip joint. So it's almost like what you did in your lunge when you leveled out your pelvis. Your right thigh is more deeply connected to your hip. I have to hold on to something for this. So this action is going to be driven by your right leg. So everything else is a passive mover. That's the most important thing to remember here. As you keep trying to spiral your right thigh up into your hip joint, imagine you're trying to turn your right toes out to the right. Right toes, right knee out to the right. Because your foot is fixed in place, because your knee cannot move, what actually moves is your whole torso. So it turns out to the left, and then it rotates to point forwards. So this movement, you should be feeling it in your right hip, in the stuff around the outer edge of your right hip. Left leg is doing nothing. It's just going along for the ride. Torso is doing nothing. Again, it's going along for the ride. So make sure you are feeling the effort in your right hip. So the front of your right hip, the side of your right hip. There'll be lots of stuff in your foot as well. Now bring right leg down. Sorry, left leg down. As your feet come down, feet are a comfortable width apart. Practice your hip hinge here. So you're tipping forwards, pelvis tips over your legs, and then come back up. Notice as you tip, whether there's any rounding in your spine. So just like when you were on all fours and you were hovering your knees and your spine was in line with itself, we want that same idea here. So like there's a broomstick connected to the back of your head, the back of your chest, and your pelvis, and it stays there as you come forward. So this action is coming from your hip joints. As you come all the way back up, shift your attention into your left leg. So again, your left foot is corkscrewing into the floor. Toes are relaxed, the ball of your foot is what's heavy. So keep that sense of a corkscrew. It comes all the way up into your hip joint as you create this action of trying to turn your thigh and your hip joint. So you rotate open to the right and then rotate forwards. Open to the right, forwards. Keep going. Make sure that you are feeling this in your hip joint. It's not in your right hip joint. Not really through your spine even. Come back to the center. Both feet planted. You can absolutely soften your knees here. If your hamstrings feel a bit restricted today, again, it's not a hamstring stretch. So I'm going to tip forwards and come back up. And it is really challenging with this movement to observe your body in space. So what you could do is like what we did at the beginning when we had our hands on our tummy when we were lifting our legs. You can do that to make sure that this space doesn't get any bigger or smaller as you move. As you come all the way back up, take hold of your brick. So this is almost like a game, really, a challenge for you to work on single leg balance and your hip hinge and a little bit of coordination. So once more, we're going to shift our weight into our right leg. The brick is in your left hand. So this is the same action as Warrior 3, but you hold it for seconds. So on our right leg, we're going to tip forwards. Our left leg comes back. With our left hand, we're going to bring the brick to the floor, pop it down, keep it there, come back up. So the weight stays in your right leg, your left leg stays light. As you come forwards, pick up the brick with your right hands and come back up. So we keep going. This right thigh is winding up into our hip joint. So you bring the block down to the floor with your right hand, come back up. And then you pick the block back up with your left hand. She says, come up. So this is difficult. It's wobbly. Move slowly. Give yourself the challenge. We learn by not being perfect. We learn by being wobbly, by making mistakes. Your body learns how to handle itself in space. I know it's frustrating. It's very frustrating when you can't even do a repetition, but be patient. We've got a couple more here. We want to end up, I say a couple more, we've got one more. We want to end up with the block in our left hand. So I've just placed that block somewhere that's going to be challenging for me to take hold of in my left hand. And I'm sorry, we want to have it in our right hand. So put it down one more time. And then pick it up with your right hand. Ooh. Back up. Oof. My right leg is really feeling that. So give your right leg a shake out, and then you get to take the weight out of your right leg now. The block is in your right hand. You're balancing on your left leg. So this side will probably be easier because your body now knows what to do. So as you come forwards, over your left leg, right leg will tip back. Drop the block off on the floor, come back up. As you come forwards now, pick up the block with your left hand. Come back up. You can place the brick somewhere more challenging. So that as you come forwards and pick it up with the other hand, you have to reach. You have to create different input for your hip joint. Make sure your toes aren't hanging on for dear life. The effort is in the body of your foot. Let's try a couple more movements here so we end up with the brick in our left hand. Beautiful. Oh, give those legs a shake out. Poor brick can come down to the floor now. Come towards the front of your mats. Feet are comfortable width apart. Bend your knees. Hinge at the hips. Notice if this movement feels perhaps more accessible. It might not, but it might. Reach your arms either forwards or up. Then come forwards, belly to thighs. Bottom lifts up. Step your legs back. Lower both knees down. Bring your legs out in front of you. And just check that you've got space behind you. Knees are bent. Bottom as close to your heels as your knees can accommodate. As you come forwards, reach your arms forwards. And then lift your arms up to the ceiling and lift your breastbone. Now reach your arms forwards again. And round your spine so your pelvis starts to tip back. As you start to come down here, can you ground through the back of your pelvis, keeping your spine round? And then without using momentum, come back up. Lift your breastbone, lift your arms. So now as we round back, depending on how your back feels, it might be that you stay with going up to about your waistband and then coming back up. It might be that you go a little bit further. You're maintaining control of the curves of your spine. So we're keeping our spine round. We're pressing our spine into the floor and then coming back up, trying not to use momentum. Let's take two more movements here on the second one. We'll let ourselves come all the way down, but with control. So this time, you can use your hands on your legs. You can reach your arms forwards. Try edging your feet closer to you as you come back. So you've got a little bit more control there. Rounding onto your back. Head lands. Arms open out wide. Notice your breath. As you arrive here on your mat, pull your knees to your chest. And give your knees a really generous circle. So almost as though you've got no muscles in your legs and your arms are just taking over the movement, taking over the effort. As you come back to stillness, keep your pelvis heavy. Make sure your knees stay stacked over your hip joints. Shins are more parallel to the ceiling as you pull your toes towards your shin. You can either use your brick here between your knees, or I like to take my hand between my knees. So my hand's in a fist. This is my right hand. My right thumb is pressing into my left knee, and my right little finger is pressing into my right knee. So it's either the block between your knees or your hand. Your knees stay squeezing whatever it is that's between them. This movement comes from your hip joints as you open your lower legs out away from each other. So your thighs are internally spiraling in your hip joints. Knees stay squeezing your hand or your brick. Feet return towards each other. The lower legs open out. Imagine here that your legs are the spine of a book. Sorry, your thighs are the spine of a book, and your lower legs are the pages. So you're opening the pages and then closing them. Make sure your toes stay pulling towards your shins, so this movement is not coming from your ankles. This time as your feet open out away from each other, remember you're squeezing your knees inwards. You're not letting them come apart. Just your feet and your lower legs that are opening. Pause and breathe. Pelvis is heavy. Internal rotation of your hip joint is extremely beneficial for your hips, but also if you suffer with back pain. Bring your feet back towards each other. Pull both knees in towards your chest and just give them a really generous circle. You might feel like you've just opened up about 2 feet more of action, movement, rotation in your hips. I definitely do. As your knees return together, lower both feet down to the floor, and take your time just to get comfortable. Let your feet, let your pelvis get gloriously heavy. And connect to your breath. I'm going to pop my blanket on here. Can be really helpful. Again, if you feel like you would like to just alleviate any pressure in the back of your pelvis, to open your feet wide and let your knees knock together. Just bring your attention to the way that your breath moves through your body, the pathway it takes through your nostrils, your throat, into your lungs. Observing the expansion of your ribs, the secondary expansion in your belly. Notice how your contact with the floor changes as you breathe in versus as you breathe out. And stay with your breath. As you begin to move your hands in time with your breath, fingers expand outwards as you breathe in. Fingers curl inwards as you breathe out. Slowly invite more movement back into your body, arms and legs. And then take your time to make your way up to a seat. Just find where your pelvis feels comfortable, stable, and where your spine is fully supported over your pelvis. As you breathe in, reach your arms out and up. Connect your palms. Breathe out, lower your thumbs to your heart space. As we bow our head to our hands, we connect head, heart, and body, sealing our practice here. Namaste.